From an early age, individuals are taught that their existence should be subordinate to the approval of others. Excellent grades in school to make parents proud, impeccable manners to avoid causing displeasure to those around them, and choosing a stable profession to avoid criticism. This way of life seems familiar, but in reality it's an invisible burden that deprives a person of peace and their true essence. Carl Jung asserted that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct a person's life, and they will call it fate. This means that much of what a person considers their identity has been imposed upon them, even without their knowledge. But it's worth pausing and reflecting. How many times has a person suppressed their opinion, fearing the judgment of others? How many opportunities were missed due to fear of making a mistake? How many times has a person felt drained, trying to meet expectations that weren't even their own? Now, looking back, one can ask themselves, did all these anxieties really change anything? Does the criticism that a person was so afraid of matter today? What did they gain by trying to please everyone? The answer is usually the same: nothing. The person simply wasted time and energy and often stopped being who they really are. The paradox of excessive attention to the evaluations of others lies in the voluntary transfer of personal well-being under the control of external forces. The individual becomes a hostage to fickle judgments, striving to meet constantly transforming standards. Exacerbating the situation is the inevitability of criticism, even with impeccable behavior. The most tragic aspect of this dependence is its infinity. By satisfying the demands of one group, a person inevitably faces the dissatisfaction of another. Justifying one expectation, they generate a series of new ones. There is a continuous process of self-improvement and adaptation for the sake of recognition, which, however, never brings satisfaction. The reason lies in a simple truth: people will always find a reason to speak out, while their own interests prevail over concern for others. Realizing this fact entails an internal transformation. There comes an understanding of the impossibility of pleasing everyone, and, more importantly, the absence of such a need. What previously seemed vital, the opinions of others, their words and perceptions, loses its significance. There is no longer a need for proof. Cessation of worry should not be interpreted as indifference or arrogance. It's about prioritizing and refusing to lose sleep over evaluations that bring nothing valuable to life. It's the realization that personal energy is too precious to waste on judgments that don't define a person's essence. The burden that a person carries in their life is often placed on their shoulders by others who are essentially indifferent to their fate and seek to suppress their spirit. However, only the person themselves has the power to decide to break free from this oppression. At first, such a step may seem strange and even wrong, but gradually, as liberation occurs, an amazing transformation takes place. The person feels free. They gain the freedom to be who they want to be, make their own decisions without fear, and finally, live in accordance with their beliefs. At this moment, the realization of an important truth comes. The approval of others was never a prerequisite for happiness. All that was needed was to break free from imposed shackles. Everyone has probably encountered a situation where they tried to convince someone to see the world through their eyes. The person spent time explaining, justifying, and providing irrefutable facts, but in the end they realized that the other person remained of their own opinion. This happens because it's impossible to control how other people interpret reality. And it's not just about different points of view. A person can be the most polite and courteous, but they can still be misunderstood. They can show kindness and compassion, but in response, they will face coldness and alienation. They can make every effort, but they will still be criticized. Ultimately, people see them through the prism of their own worldview, which is beyond their control. The delusion of omnipotence pushes a person onto a path where every action, word, and even thought must be impeccable in order to avoid censure, rejection, and failure. However, reality is relentless. There will always be factors beyond control. This is the law of life, applicable to everything. Even the most meticulous plan can be ruined by a random event. Sincere efforts to strengthen relationships do not guarantee the eternal loyalty of a partner. The pursuit of universal recognition is doomed to partial failure because there will always be someone who doesn't like you. The stronger the desire for control, the deeper the suffering, because absolute power is a myth. Attempts to hold the unholdable only lead to anxiety, disappointment, and exhaustion. But don't despair, because happiness doesn't depend on omnipotence. Accepting the inevitability of chaos and unpredictability eases life's burdens. True freedom begins with recognizing the limits of your capabilities and shifting focus to the only thing that can truly be changed, yourself. From a young age, people are drawn into the pursuit of approval, which is not merely a spontaneous desire, but part of a complex system where victory is impossible. In childhood, there are calls to be an obedient child, but what does that mean in real life? It implies unquestioning adherence to established norms, often without critical reflection. Obedience is followed by praise and favor, while disobedience is met with condemnation, sanctions, or alienation. From an early age, it is learned that love and recognition are conditional upon meeting external requirements, which creates a hidden fear, the fear of not being good enough. This fear intensifies with age. The educational system instills that a person's value is determined by good grades. The mass media impose the idea that attractiveness is the key to love. The labor market demands high productivity to earn respect. All of society conveys the idea that a person's value depends on external attributes, appearance, material well-being, social status, behavior. The inability to meet these standards creates a feeling of inferiority. But why is this happening? The answer lies in the fact that self-doubt becomes a source of enormous profits for corporations and entire industries. When an individual experiences doubts about their own attractiveness and competence, they become more receptive to consumption. They begin to buy clothes following imposed fashion standards, resort to cosmetic procedures in an effort to earn social recognition, enroll in all sorts of courses to appear more intellectually developed, and buy things designed to impress others. The fear of being rejected, of not meeting someone's expectations, is a powerful engine of the modern economy. Ultimately, if everyone were satisfied with themselves and their situation, what percentage of the goods and services offered by the market would remain unclaimed? The system is designed so that the individual constantly feels a lack of something, a sense of inferiority. There is always a new ideal, a new product, a new unattainable goal. A person cannot relax, cannot simply be themselves, because in that case they will cease to be a manageable consumer. But what if an individual decided to step out of this vicious game? What if, instead of chasing external approval, they realized that their value does not require proof? What would happen if they accepted themselves for the first time as they are, without regard to the opinions of others? The answer is simple. Freedom would come. Freedom from imposed standards, from the endless race for an illusory ideal, from the fear of being rejected. The ability to maintain detachment is a valuable skill that can free a person from the burden of excessive expectations. Often people suffer not so much from the events themselves as from the meaning they attach to those events. The main source of this suffering is excessive attachment, an obsessive need for certain things or people to conform to their personal ideas. However, the reality is that the stronger the attachment, the more vulnerable a person becomes. If they make their well-being dependent on the approval of others, they inevitably become a hostage to the opinions of others. Clinging to the past, they condemn themselves to endlessly reliving pain that should have long gone away. If their well-being depends on only one factor, they live in constant fear of losing it. It is important to understand that detachment does not imply coldness or indifference. It means the ability to love without seeking to possess, to desire without feeling need, to live without depending. A person can have deep feelings for another, but their happiness should not depend entirely on that person. They can make plans and dream, but should not allow themselves to be destroyed if something goes wrong. They can be dedicated to their work, but should not make it the sole source of their self-esteem. True strength lies not in frantically holding on to something, but in confidently letting go. Dependence on something or someone is just a veiled fear, a fear of loss, change, and lack of control over the situation. In contrast, detachment grants true freedom. By mastering the art of letting go, a person discovers a powerful truth. Everything necessary is already hidden in their inner world. Paradoxically, the less effort is made to hold on to something, the more naturally the desired comes into life. That which demanded tension and struggle disappears on its own. Suffering transforms into ease and serenity. What seemed vital turns out to be just a minor detail. True strength lies not in desperate clinging, but in the ability to exist in harmony with oneself, regardless of what comes and goes. Imagine waking up when all anxieties and worries have lost their significance. Criticism no longer stings, others' opinions become a distant and indistinguishable noise, and expectations that once held you captive seem utterly irrelevant. There is no longer a need to justify your decisions or prove anything to those around you. This freedom comes when one simply stops worrying. At first, such a transformation may cause bewilderment. For years, a person has built their life striving to please others, constantly worrying about their evaluations and desperately trying to conform to accepted norms. The fear of being rejected followed them like a shadow. However, when an individual frees themselves from this heavy burden, true magic happens, anxiety gradually recedes, fear dissipates, and they experience the taste of genuine life for the first time. Released from the relentless need for approval, one begins to make decisions based on their own true desires, not on the expectations of others. They allow themselves to experiment, make mistakes, change their point of view without experiencing paralyzing fear of possible criticism. Now they realize that the judgments of others have no power over their destiny. The most surprising thing is that, paradoxically, when someone stops seeking approval, others begin to have even more respect for them. The world unmistakably recognizes the difference between someone who desperately needs confirmation of their importance and someone who feels comfortable alone with themselves. Self-confidence, like a magnet, attracts respect. People who live in harmony with themselves and are not afraid of others' opinions radiate inner strength, which, like a beacon, inspires those around them. In the process of personal growth, there comes a moment when emotional stability becomes not just a desired trait, but a reality. What once caused a storm of emotions is now perceived as insignificant noise. Critical remarks turn into empty sounds, not worthy of attention. The realization that it is impossible to please everyone is accepted as a given, without causing regret. Unforeseen circumstances and deviations from the intended plan no longer lead to despair, but only stimulate the search for new solutions. When one stops allowing external factors to control their internal state, an amazing transformation occurs. A deep sense of peace and harmony with oneself sets in. The absence of the need to wear masks, the fear of being judged, and the obsessive worry about others' opinions opens the way to true freedom. It is realized that the meaning of life is not in striving to please others, but in following one's own path and truth. And then finally, one finds the opportunity to live a full life, not constrained by others' expectations and fears.